Welcome to the Big Question podcast, brought to you by Brook Street, part of the leading global workforce solutions company, Manpower Group. This podcast will feature a blend of interviews and discussions with leading experts. This will include academics and thought leaders sharing their perspectives on the ever-changing world of work.
Thank you for joining us on another insightful episode of the Big Question podcast, where we delve into the burning issues of our era and their impact on business and society. I'm your host, Rhys O'Leary. And for today's discussion, we turn our focus to an arena of remarkable promise, profound challenges, and boundless speculation: artificial intelligence and the future of work. As AI continues to evolve, it's reshaping our lives and the very essence of work as we know it. Job market trends are beginning to be rewritten. Skills for tomorrow's workforce are being redefined, and the mandate for individuals and businesses to stay ahead of the curve has never been more critical. But what does this entail? What can we as professionals and business enthusiasts do to not only engage but lead with this new era shift? Now, bringing her tech agility, business acumen, and human-centric leadership, I had an opportunity the other day to catch up with Estelle McCartney, Chief Growth Officer at Arctic Shores. Welcome to the Big Question podcast, Estelle. Tell our listeners about Arctic Shores and the work you do with them.
Hi, Rhys. Great to be with you today, and thanks for the opportunity to have a conversation about everything that is happening in the world of AI and recruitment. So I am Chief Growth Officer at Arctic Shores, which is a task-based psychometric assessment company. And we work with companies who are looking to hire for potential, to unearth possibly overlooked people in the job market who are wanting to scrap the CV, look and identify people from broader talent pools who care about building a diverse workforce and who want to create a fantastic, engaging candidate experience when they are recruiting. And my role here at the company is to, I guess, two things. One, to be out in the marketplace speaking to potential future customers, and also to work with our existing customers. And what that gives me is a privilege to get an insight into some of the challenges, the trends, the insights that are happening out there in the marketplace. And I guess really since May and the launch of sort of ChatGPT into the mass market, a lot of those conversations and a lot of those insights and the research that we've been doing have been around the impact of Gen AI in the recruitment space, both from a company perspective, but also from the candidate perspective.
Gen AI has the possibility to really revolutionize recruitment. And, I'm actually utilizing it on a day-to-day within my role as an operational trainer. What sort of impact do you see it having on the more, transactional type business?
I mean, the impact of Gen AI is absolutely enormous. I mean, ChatGPT is the fastest adopted piece of technology ever in the history of the universe. And I think we've been seeing, I guess, the impact from two perspectives. The first is obviously the potential for TA teams and recruiters to use it themselves in their own processes, to drive efficiencies, to do more quickly. And I guess really it enables them to kind of have a helping hand in some of those repetitive, boring, more straightforward tasks and free them up to focus their time and their efforts and thinking where that kind of human interaction and that human value and input is even more important. And I think it's fair to say that, we as recruiters and TA leaders have actually been using AI probably for quite some time. If you think about, some of the ATSs, think about some of the candidate attraction portals, AI has been around us for a while, but I think the really interesting change that everyone's seen and everyone's talking about is more, in recent months, is more around the impact on kind of candidate use. So I referenced the rapid adoption of Gen AI by candidates. And there's two kind of parts to that for us to think about. Really importantly, it's really changing how candidates apply for jobs. So they now have got access to tools to help them speed up or expedite or change the way that they present themselves to potential employers. And I guess from a TA leader's perspective, what we're starting to see therefore is a huge increase in the volume of applications that teams are receiving. I mean, there's some incredibly whizzy, wacky and wonderful, very inexpensive tools that candidates can use that will literally take their CVs or their resumes or their LinkedIn profiles and send out hundreds of applications literally while they are sleeping. So, sweet dreams for the candidate, complete nightmare for recruiters. And I think then what we're seeing then is companies seeing a real gap between what's been presented to them by the candidate at the start of the process in sort of the written phase, whether that's a CV or a covering letter or an application form, and then potentially the candidate then that presents themselves at interview stage or assessment stage. And so that's one part of it. I think the second element is that it's really changing how candidates expect to kind of show up at work. So, we might all be a little bit more nervous about using AI or might not be completely au fait with it yet. But what we're seeing is that, from secondary school students, I think there's 7 out of 10 of them are using ChatGPT for their homework. We did a survey over the summer about how students and recent graduates, what their views were on the use of Gen AI to apply for jobs. And, we discovered that 7 out of 10 of them either, had used it already in an application or expected to use it for a job application in the next 12 months. And I think even more interestingly, candidates expect companies to be, or young people expect companies to be embracing Gen AI. So that same survey that we did of 2,000 students found that a third wouldn't apply to a company that said they couldn't use Gen AI in their application process. A third would be put off applying to a job in that company that took that sort of barring it role. And a third would view them as being sort of less progressive, less modern, less forward facing. So I know from conversations there's been a big debate sort of in the assessment community and in the recruitment community about whether you should be sort of viewing it as cheating and preventing candidates from using it. And I think my advice based on what we've learned from that survey, what we're kind of learning from speaking to the candidates that we work with, that this is reality for them. This is, it's here, they're using it, they expect to use it. It'd be like sort of banning someone from using a calculator now. And I think that's a really big thing for talent teams to get their head around.
Well, AI is definitely here to stay, isn't it? And I don't think it's going to go away. How has what's the impact of this been on Arctic shores, and how are you sort of looking to not combat but work with this alongside the behavioural assessments?
Yeah. So again, there's kind of there's two things that I would say that we need to think about in this kind of AI-driven environment. The first thing is that AI is really changing the skills that will be needed in I say the future workforce, but actually the current workforce. We really need to rethink what it is that we are assessing for, what we are selecting for. So if you think about the things that AI can do, whether that's bots or other forms of AI, the need to have lots of knowledge, or to retain knowledge, or to be able to kind of answer specific questions, has become a lot less important. What the workforce of the future will need to be able to do or to demonstrate is things like critical thinking, or problem solving, or learning agility, or resilience, or thinking about things like empathy. And so really the kind of the successful companies will be those that really understand what are the kind of the success criteria, the traits, the components that will become more important in the future workforce, and the things that I should be looking for, rather than looking for or assessing existing knowledge or existing experience. And I think, there are companies that have already started to move away from thinking about that because, they've been thinking about addressing like the skills crisis or skills gap, or they've been realizing that there are roles that experience just doesn't exist. So kind of looking at CVs isn't going to help you fill those roles. And so they've been kind of moving towards not assessing and looking at experience and knowledge, but looking at, behaviors, personality traits, and assessing that, and then assessing cognitive ability and learning agility, and looking at a candidate not from a perspective of their history and their past and what they might have done in the past, but actually looking at their potential and assessing for potential. And I think that the kind of the emergence of Gen AI into the scene is only going to expedite that trend, whether you want to call it, skills-based hiring or skills-first hiring or potential-based hiring. And then it becomes, this is the second area that I think we all have to get our heads around. It's fundamentally going to have to change the way that we assess and select. And I mean here, the process that we have. So I mentioned that we've been, doing a lot of thinking over the summer at Arctic Shores around what all of this means for assessment. And there've been quite a lot of heated debate in the assessment community. And, with kind of traditional assessment providers who are sort of text-based or verbal-based and versus some of the newer assessment providers like Arctic Shores who are task-based about what does all this mean. And we thought there was a lot of heat and a bit of an absence of light on the debate. So what we did, our team of data scientists worked with a couple of UCL postgraduate students, and they had a lot of fun over the summer in a really kind of methodical and comprehensive research project, getting ChatGPT to complete assessments that are currently on the marketplace. So verbal reasoning assessments, numerical reasoning, SJTs, personality assessment tests, and the fascinating thing and the slightly worrying thing was that ChatGPT, and particularly the paid-for version of it, could absolutely outperform a human. And it really didn't require much experience or expertise in using ChatGPT to use it to complete an assessment. So indeed, ChatGPT has its own personality, which is quite, it's very agreeable, it's low neuroticism, which would be quite appealing in its own right. But what we did is if you fed in a job description, ChatGPT would moderate its responses based on the job description and the sort of the traits and the personality that would likely to equate to success. And so what the sort of the conclusion from that project, was really there was a few things that recruitment teams and companies really need to think about in their assessment. If they really want to get an authentic insight into a candidate, particularly for campaigns and early careers where you've got thousands of applicants or hundreds of applicants, but indeed for any recruitment campaign, what you're really, the essence of what you're trying to do is get an authentic insight into that campaign. There's a few things that they're going to have to change to be sort of ChatGPT proof. They're going to have to move away from text-based questions or applications or assessments, because ChatGPT is itself text-based, and therefore it can easily answer. You can just put in the question and it can very quickly just come up with the answer. So you need to be looking for more interactive, task-based assessments that can't be cheated by ChatGPT. You're going to have to look for assessments that look at not just the final answer that the candidate gives, but actually, can you score the whole approach? So if you remember when you were in school and doing your maths classes, you didn't get a score just for getting the right answer. You also got scored if you showed your working out. I'm sure we can all remember our maths teacher saying, be sure to show us the working out, and you might get some points for that. So you need to kind of try and find assessments that can do that. They're going to have to, regularly be refreshed. And also, you're going to have to make sure that they can provide not just an insight to a right or wrong answer, but is it an assessment that really helps me assess those critical things that I mentioned earlier? So how somebody thinks, how they approach something, how they might learn at work, how they respond to setbacks. Because these are going to be the things in, the AI future workforce that are going to be the skills and the traits that equate to success.
So, Estelle, what strategies can individuals and businesses adopt to stay ahead of the AI revolution? And how important is adaptability in this context?
So the first thing I would say, Reese, is actually to think about AI just as another business tool. So, whenever you're thinking about the use of it, as you would with any other tool, you just got to think of it as a means to an end. So keep focused on what is the business outcome or objective that you're trying to achieve, and is there a role or not for AI in helping you achieve that business object. But if I just say a few words sort of more related to thinking about AI in the context of recruitment and selection, I've spoken a bit about the need to redesign assessment and the challenges that ChatGPT and GenAI pose to text-based traditional assessments. But if we just go back a step, what we're seeing companies doing, and I guess what I would advise, is really to think about, sort of calling it a bit of a vulnerability audit. And what I mean by vulnerability is how vulnerable are each of the steps in your process to sort of being messed up by the use of ChatGPT. And by that, I mean that they prevent you getting an authentic insight into a candidate. So I guess I want to be really clear that there's a bit of a debate going on about whether you should deter candidates from using GenAI. and that's sort of basically saying to them, using ChatGPT in this application is cheating, and we will look upon that unfavorably. And our counsel on that would be that is not the modern, sensible way to go, and you will lose a lot of candidates, and you're just swimming against the tide. The other option is for you to try to detect whether it's being used or not in your process by sort of proctoring or, methodologies that have been used in recruitment, for a long time. And again, our advice on those is that, they are not, that's not the solution for a couple of reasons. One is that, they are not absolutely perfect and, 100% accurate. And there's a real risk of sort of a false positive, and how do you handle that and the implications of handling that. But also they've been shown to have a particularly detrimental effect on some protected groups of candidates. And so the deter methodology is not what we would advise. What we're seeing the more kind of progressive companies doing is actually redesigning their process and conducting that vulnerability audit as the first stage in that to understand which steps in the process where ChatGPT might have an impact. And really kind of thinking about, well, obviously, if it's a face-to-face interview, you're probably going to be okay. But if you are asking for a written application or a covering letter or a CV right at the top of that funnel, and we know from, speaking to our customers, they're just seeing a huge increase in the number of applications they're getting. And it's not because they've suddenly massively improved their employee brand or their attraction strategy. It's because candidates are using these tools to fire out multiple applications using Gen AI. And so you need to look at the different steps. And if you have got an assessment phase, you need to look at that step and go, how ChatGPT proof is this assessment? And then this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the critical things about it should be task-based, it should be interactive, it should be refreshed, it should be able to assess not just a final answer, but look at how the candidate is holistically approaching the assessment. And so, that might mean, looking at a different assessment provider. It might be about designing one in-house yourself. I think the other thing that would really advise is around, coaching candidates on, how they should use Gen AI. So not just, either accusing them of cheating if they're using it or not giving them any guidance, but thinking about what do you say on your careers website about, look, you might want to use ChatGPT to kind of improve the quality of your answer or your covering letter. But remember that what we're looking for is to get an authentic insight into the true you. And so provide them with a bit of a steer and guidance in a way that gives them clarity, that you're looking for original ideas, original thought, and giving them a bit of a steer because they're navigating this whole new world as well. And I think the final thing I would say is act now. It's human nature, isn't it? To kind of go, oh my goodness, this is all very big and scary. There are some small steps that you can take, and actually Arctic Shores has provided a report and some advice on how to conduct that vulnerability audit that you can get from our website that just gives some really practical initial steps to take. But do it now, because it's maybe a hill to climb right now, but if you do nothing, it's very quickly going to become a mountain. And there are lots and lots of sources and resources. And in fact, we've kind of set up a TA disruptors community at Arctic Shores. And one of the things that we're really talking about and bringing people together to talk about is the impact of Gen AI, because we're all kind of in this together, learning together, making mistakes, dealing with it, as it's changing rapidly. So I think don't, sit alone, worrying about it. Start to kind of join some of these, peer groups and expert groups, learn, share. There is a lot of advice out there. And again, it's just like I said, it's another business problem to solve. Break it down into chunks, have a project plan, be clear in what it is you're trying to achieve. You don't have to be an absolute technical expert yourself on understanding how AI works. You just need to understand the impact of it on achieving the business goals or the kind of the recruitment goals that you're trying to achieve.
Well, listeners, it wouldn't be a surprise to hear that I use ChatGPT every single day when it comes to my emails, or actually I even use it to start the basis of my presentations, to where I can then add my own thoughts and really grow it from there. One of the things that I'm really keen on, and a question I've actually got for you, Estelle, is how can technology and AI be leveraged to ensure diversity and inclusion in the recruitment process, particularly in the context of Gen AI?
That's a really interesting one, and it's something that there's been quite a lot of debate and discussion around. And I think there's been some examples where companies have got it horribly wrong because they have relied solely on technology and forgotten about the importance of the human touch and human interaction. So I guess my starting point would be that it's a false premise to think, technology and AI bad and potentially biased, and humans free from bias. In fact, one of the reasons that Arctic Shores was set up, and one of the reasons that companies come and work with us, is because they're very mindful of the subconscious bias that we all have, and that, many people that are interviewing people or looking at CVs and seeing particular universities or particular schools or particularly companies featuring in a candidate's past experience, that the bias that can creep in if you are, as a human being. And so one of the things I said that, companies work with us is because they want to bring a bit more data and consistency and fairness into the process. So we take approximately 12,000 data points when a candidate is taking our assessment, and those data points do not care which school or university that candidate went to, what their gender is, what the household income was of that candidate. They're really just looking at those data points. But the algorithms and the conclusions and how then those data points are applied to that candidate's score have all been created with a huge amount of human intervention and, psychometric and business psychology expertise. And I think it is around making sure that you get that blend right, of technology, where actually it can remove human bias, but making sure that you're not just letting technology, be created or to be set up without those human checks. And another thing that we learned as a result of our research over the summer with our data scientist team, and again, it's a really interesting and slightly concerning aspect of the impact of candidates that are using ChatGPT to complete assessments is we tested both the free model, ChatGPT 3.5, which are free, and we also ran all of the assessments using the paid for version, ChatGPT 4. And it's about £20, roughly £20 a month subscription. And the paid for model significantly outperformed the free version of ChatGPT in how it completed the assessments. And so, there had been a bit of conversation about saying, oh, this ChatGPT is brilliant because it gives access for every candidate to that helpful parent or that great careers advisor, which is really going to help us to level the playing field. And unfortunately, what our research showed is it's not that straightforward, because the candidates that can afford to pay for the subscription version, again, have got a foot up compared to those candidates that can't afford to pay for it. And so we've got to be really mindful that we're not naive about thinking this is the great leveler. And I know a lot of companies have been doing some really excellent stuff to try to improve social mobility in the recruitment process. And I'm concerned that if people aren't really engaging with what does ChatGPT mean for my process? How do I need to rethink the recruitment process based on its adoption by candidates? Then we might sort of go backwards on that social mobility front. So something that we're really highlighting and speaking about as a consideration of that need to redesign your process now in this ChatGPT world.
AI and the ethics, we're talking about a really big ethical side of things there, around diversity and inclusion. But what are some of the other unexpected ethical considerations business leaders need to make around Gen AI to ensure that we progress? We don't lose sight of the critical ethical issues, such as not just the bias we've been talking about, but maintaining that fair and equitable process.
So, Rhys, as I mentioned, Gen AI has made the application playing fields uneven because of the difference in performance between the paid for and the freed version. And I think that's just one element of the kind of the considerations and the issues. I think you've got to think about it from a kind of an age perspective as well. Younger candidates, younger employees are more likely to be able to use it to improve productivity than older employees. So I think you've got to make sure that you're trying to be inclusive, that you are being mindful that its introduction either into the workplace or into generally or into recruitment might have a different impact on different groups. And we also learned from the survey that we did of 2,000 candidates that usage of it seems to be slightly higher amongst some underrepresented groups. So, for example, Black and neurodiverse candidates seem to be more likely to use it to apply for a role. So again, if you ban it, then actually you might be sort of creating a bit of an ethical issue there and also an issue for reaching your diversity and inclusion roles. So I guess, as long as you are getting that balance right between human touch, both in your overall process, but also in the understanding how that particular tool has been created, what sits behind it, and really interrogating that to make sure that, that there aren't sort of built-in biases to the tools. I think, those are the kind of the key factors, really. And I think, in the world of recruitment, there's always going to be that human touch, that interview, let's keep things in perspective here. There is definitely a huge role at the top of the recruitment funnel, and thinking about that the impact there. But I can't imagine any scenario in which that interview, that human interaction is not going to take place. So I think recruitment is possibly an area in the overall business where it's very human-centric. And actually, my view is that the introduction of Gen AI is going to free us up to be able to devote more of our time to that human interaction and that higher value activity, and we can let the bots and the AI take care of some of the more administrative, repetitive roles. So I think that most of the TA and business leaders that I speak to, although they might be nervous about some aspects of it, they're generally really excited about how it's going to improve their working lives and enable them to spend their time doing the higher value, interesting, human, strategic things, and less of the repetitive, mundane things. So I'm definitely an optimist about what Gen AI means for all of us, be we candidates or be we employees or employers.
I'm not afraid to say that I am actually an early adopter. I absolutely think it's fantastic. It's a brilliant tool. And it is just that. It needs to be viewed as a tool. A lot of what we do as human beings and the social interaction that actually we need to survive is about being with other humans. And actually, AI is there as a tool to enable us to be able to streamline, as you say, Estelle, some of more of those mundane, administrative, repetitive tasks. I genuinely believe that this has been one of the most exciting conversations that we've had, especially with that forward look of what's out there in the future. And Estelle, thank you so much for your time today. And I love the deep dive into the intricate world of Gen AI and actually how technology is going to help embrace that future for us. So again, a huge thank you to Estelle McCartney from Arctic Shores, our guest today, for sharing her expertise and shedding light on some of the nuances around AI and the technology that is once again embracing our world. Thank you once again, listeners, for tuning in to the Big Question podcast. If you found today's episode enlightening, be sure to subscribe to our podcast to hear more compelling conversations. You've been listening to the Big Question podcast, brought to you by Brook Street, part of the leading global workforce solutions company, Manpower Group. To find out more about how we can support your business and give you access to the best talent in the market, visit www.brookstreet.co.uk/employer-services.